going to talk a little bit about characterization and motivation, which is really important from an actor's point of view. So here we have Courtney, who recently portrayed Lady Macbeth. So Lady Macbeth, really dull character, very boring, not much to get into.
Super boring, yes.
Well, obviously that's not true. So what do we know about Lady Macbeth? Do we have any backstory on her?
So, not surprising, we don't have very much information. There is a little bit here and there in the script, and part of that's just because Shakespeare's audience would have already had a basis for what a queen means and who this person is, and know quite a bit about Scotland itself and have some assumptions about Scotland. But what we do know is there is enough references in the conversations that she has with her husband Macbeth that leads us to believe that they probably have talked about having to kill the king before these moments, before the prophecy. Maybe not like a solid, yeah, let's definitely do it, but like it's been a conversation before. And we know that they are very high up in the ranks, that they probably are pretty close to the throne. We also know, based on one sentence in one monologue, that Lady Macbeth did have a son that was a baby at some point in her life. Where that baby is now, we have to fill in some blanks, you know. It's likely assumed that it died, which was very common at the time for babies to die. I think that's pretty much, we don't know where her parentage is. We don't necessarily know where she came from. I know there are some productions that choose to make her a foreign person entering this court.
An outsider.
That's right, yeah. We didn't do that in our story, but it's open enough that you could choose that for whatever reason you might want to.
So because we have all these gaps of knowledge, it's up to a reader, if they're reading it, or a performer, and thereby an extension, the audience, to fill in these gaps of whether or not, and it's so interesting to me, the idea that they've had this conversation before. This isn't a new dream. They're not just coming up with this idea for the first time, because that would be pretty quick if it was just based on the prophecy to have this conversation for the first time and immediately go kill the king.
Yeah, and even just like, yes, I agree. Both of them individually improvised that murder must happen, which of course, you know, Shakespeare was telling the story that Scotland was much more barbaric than England was because that was part of the culture of the time. But yes, there is indication based on them referencing when they talked before that they had discussed that murder was a possible choice.
And I find it really interesting also, the allusion to the baby and the question of where is that child now, because another character says he has no sons at some point. Yes. So that gives us two different answers. Either the son is not his or the son is no more.
Yeah, the character that ultimately ends up killing Macbeth in the end of the story does say in a conversation that he can't quite get revenge on Macbeth for killing all of his kids because Macbeth himself has no kids.
Right.
So we know that either the baby was not Macbeth's baby, which doesn't really make sense because we'd have to really fill in some blanks there.
Right.
Or that the baby is dead.
Right.
Right? And so when someone loses a child, even back in the day when child loss was so much more common, that would have a lot of implications about how they approach the world they live in.
Absolutely, and how it would have affected her as a character. Absolutely. So let's get into hopes and dreams. What is it that Lady Macbeth wants? What is her, well, maybe not quite motivation, but what is it that would be on Lady Macbeth's vision board? What is she Pinteresting about? What is she journaling about? What is it that she wants?
Yeah, I mean, people don't necessarily describe her as dreamy.
Right, no, that's not the word. Dreams almost feels wrong. What are her well, we'll get to nightmares later. Right.
Yeah, so she, as every person, has big desires and strong desires. And some people's desires don't involve having a lot of power in the country, but hers do. She very much wants to hold the throne. We see indication that she thinks she would be very good at it and that Macbeth would be very good at it for whatever reason. Me as the actor, I filled in some of the blanks about her child loss. And I was thinking about Scotland as her opportunity to have the country as her baby and to be the mother of her motherland.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And yeah, that's something that worked for me as a performer, and it may not work for every actor, and that's okay.
And that's great. That's the great thing about theater, is that we are allowed to fill in those gaps provided everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, as long as everyone on the team knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm not just pulling stuff out of a hat
Right.
and deciding that I'm a foreign princess invading the country and nobody else knows about that. Like, they need to know what I
They do
choose.
need, yeah.
But yeah, and so that's what juices me as a person, and that means that gives me the ability to fill that authenticity and truth into my performance.
Right. You said she believes that he would be a good king and she'd be a good queen, or at least maybe she's a good enough queen that it doesn't matter whether he's a good king or not. So what is it that she fears? What is it that Lady Macbeth what keeps her awake at night?
Yeah, I mean, she says explicitly in her first scene that she fears Macbeth is not strong enough to do what needs to be done.
Right.
Or rather, the way that she phrases it is that he has too much of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way, right? And so she worries that he's not going to be cutthroat enough.
Yeah, you're too nice.
Yeah, but I do think she does believe he would be an amazing king.
Right.
And he's an amazing warrior.
Yeah, we know this, that he's a
Yeah.
great warrior.
Yeah, and that's essential in these times. But I think she also sees how good he is with his compadres, like Banquo and him are super tight.
Right, yeah.
And that he's got a great slickness when he's got his royal costume on,
Yes.
if you will, right? He's got all the tools. It's just that, darn it, he's a little too nice.
He's too nice.
And you can't be super nice when you're in a monarchy, because
Right.
you got to be a little bit cutthroat to
Yeah.
keep that power. But I think underneath that fear is something much more a human story that we can all relate to, and that is the fear of a loss of control. Because she can control all the things that she does to get to where she goes, but she can't control an essential person
Right.
in this story. He's got to do the stabby stab.
He's got to do it.
She even says, I would have stabbed him myself if he didn't look like my dad when
Oh,
he was
dear old
sleeping,
dad,
right?
yeah.
So she needs him to do this, and she knows it's going to be hard for him, but that if he can do it, then man, we will rule the greatest Scotland
Right.
that ever was.
And if only it was that simple, that it's just the one stabby stab and their dreams come true.
That's the thing, it's like
Yeah.
she's so naive in some ways. She thinks they're just gonna off the king and there will be no repercussions after
Yeah.
that. And of course, that sets into motion many, many murders that she doesn't necessarily facilitate and plan, but the blood is on her hands,
Yes.
if you will.
And she certainly didn't foresee the psychological trauma that both of them would be dealing with, in addition, the fear, the guilt, what's coming next, and
Exactly.
And it
She
all-
doesn't expect that fallout at all. She fully thinks that I'm assuming that whenever her child died, she was able to compartmentalize that so much that she's like, well, I can handle that. I'll just compartmentalize any of the darkness that comes my way. But it doesn't turn out that way for her. It takes over. And is that because she's psychologically weak? Or is that because the witches have cursed her and she's brought in metaphysical stuff that has ruined her life?
right.
You don't know.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. You've given me a whole lot of things to think about and a lot of things to talk about with my students as well. So thanks for having this conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're gonna get inside the mind of the man portraying the main character, the title character in Macbeth. It's a tragedy. You know the rule of a tragedy. If your name's on the title, it's probably not gonna end up well for you, is it, Aiden?
Probably gonna die at the end.
Probably, there's a really good chance.
Yeah.
And so Macbeth starts out as a thane. What is a thane? What's the equivalent of a thane nowadays?
A thane is a lord, so,
Okay.
right? Like it's much like how we have many terms for the same thing in English, right? A lord, a count, a duke, an earl. There
Yeah.
are variances, but we all kind of know,
Yeah.
without knowing the details, what that means.
He's on the up and up.
He's on the up and
Yeah.
up. Yes, yes.
Good.
And he's a general in the army of Scotland, and he's been instrumental in defeating the invading army from Norway. And unlike a lot of generals, he's even been on the front lines. He's going in there with all of his guys.
Yeah.
He's not sitting in the back, twirling his mustache, plotting strategy. He's
Yeah.
there front and center with the broadsword.
So he had to have been liked by his
Very
men, by
much
his
so.
people.
He's liked by everybody. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
very well loved.
And that's really interesting to start out. I mean, he starts out loved, ends up Not loved.
Not loved, not so much. No, no.
So what are some things that you feel inspires your character, Macbeth?
I think what inspires him the most is his wife. The
Yeah.
love he has for his wife, the fierceness she possesses, her strength, her determination, I think inspires him to want to try and be a better human being, a better, stronger human being.
Yeah. Man, does she screw up?
Yes. Yeah. People make mistakes.
Absolutely, they do make mistakes. But he does have that fierce connection to his wife.
Yes.
What else would you say kind of inspire him throughout the course of the play?
Ambition,
Yeah.
which might be kind of what ends up being his Achilles heel, right? He wants to be a great man doing great things and being on the world stage, which most people want that. Yeah, so I think he's wanting to achieve as much as he can in
Yeah.
the limited time that he has.
He wants more.
Yes.
And ironically enough, he had it. He had a great thing going,
Yes,
didn't he?
yes, yeah, he does.
Yeah. What would you say are his fears or things that, you know, that block some of the things that he wants?
Right. Well, again, I think what's interesting is his fears are as common as his desires in terms of there's a seed of this in everybody. I think his fear is not being a great man. His fear is not being of value. His fear is being ineffectual. And I think his fear of wasting the limited amount of time he has to achieve nothing.
Hello guys, here we are back again with Augustine, who plays Ross and the second murderer. So we're going to talk to him about some of that. So, Augustine, how was it playing both of those characters?
It was a lot of fun. Generally, as an actor for myself, I always try to find the fun in any role that I can get, even if the role is, playing the murderer,
Yeah.
right? But because that's something that I have done in the past before in other shows, I was just kind of ready to get back into it. And all that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to ask you two things to start off with, or a question for both of your characters, is what are your characters' backstories? I know sometimes, like with the second murderer, they're not there for the whole play, but I'm sure you had to create some kind of story for them to play.
Yeah. I have a wild imagination. And with characters like Second Murder and whatnot, we're not given a lot about them except for, the couple of exchanges that they have with other characters. So for the Second Murder, I kind of created this whole idea of that, he's this like slow person in society, really wants to try to prove himself, right? Probably like a laborer, right? Has to do hard labor and all that stuff, all that work. Then he, gets contracted by Macbeth to, go and do some stabby stabs in the show, right? So yeah, that's the Second Murder. The Thane of Ross has a little bit more. He, being, I think, for myself and for in the context of the show, he's a young character in the world of Macbeth. Still has huge aspirations, huge dreams and ambition, right? Really wants to become a person who is notable, a person who has power, right? Who has a say in things and all that stuff, and really pay his part to society is one really big thing, I think, for Ross as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. A little stabby. I'm into it. So another good question that I'd like to know is, and you kind of touched base off of their aspirations and what they were wanting to do in their life, but what are their dreams and aspirations as it relates to the plot of the show?
Yeah. For Ross, I think his biggest dream and aspiration is to just bring peace to his land. I always kind of envisioned him as someone, who really loves where he's from, loves the people that he's with, loves who he works with, and loves his friends, right? In the show, we kind of like a more, fun-loving, happy-go-lucky guy. He's kind of serious. He kind of loses, like this sense of like who has the power, who is in control of things, right? So he wants everything to be secure, and to drive forward towards a better future, right? For the second murder, I think he just doesn't want to be in poverty. So he's willing to do anything to get what he wants and just become someone, in the play. So.
Yeah. What do you think they're afraid of?
But once people start, dying and Ross sees that it's surrounding him, I need to become a leader and, try to start to figure things out for myself instead of just letting myself be led as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking about those two characters.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be back with some more stabby stabs.
Stabby stab.
And we're back. My name is Trey, and I got Verda here, who played Lennox and Lady Mcduff. Now, first of all, 2 characters. That's crazy. Tell me about that.
It is crazy. No, it's not that crazy. Actually, it is a Shakespearean convention. He would have a certain number of actors, right? But he'd have way more characters. So he would double cast. Makes it easier. Same for our production. It costs the same to have one actor play multiple parts, but
Wow, I have never thought about it like that. It makes a lot of sense. But now we're going to hit a little lightning round. Boom, boom. First question. What are your characters' dreams? What are their motivations? Go.
Okay. Lennox, his dream was to be a powerful thing, just like everyone else. So he was young, he was learning, he's growing, and so he just wanted to keep his status and maybe go up in status. Lady Mcduff, women in that time, not a lot of power. Survival, manage her home, take care of her family, live.
Yeah, okay, now let me flip it on you real quick.
Okay.
So, instead of their dreams, tell me about their fears. What were they afraid of?
Lennox may have been afraid of failure, dying, because he was fighting, war, all the things. So yeah, afraid of that. Lady Mcduff, fear is dying, a family, death, pain, loss.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That is some scary stuff. Now, I just take it back for a second. Why don't you tell me about their backstories? Where do these people come from? What were they like?
I think for the production, like for the play, most of the people would understand where they were all coming from. Now, like today, I would think I didn't really understand when I started where all these people, like what their lives were. So Lennox backstory, I just basically made it up. He's young. I just kind of kept him simple. He's young. He's ambitious. And trying to learn. So I use that as just him looking around and seeing and loving it, not loving, but respecting the people around him and trying to grow and then trying to keep himself safe and what would be the best place or best action for me to take to develop, to grow.
Right.
Same for Lady Mcduff. I mean, like I said, there's not very much power for a woman back then. And like living that long is already, you're just lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
But her goal was basically the same as it would be today. It's just that it was probably a lot more treacherous. So just family and also maintaining her status, like her husband's status and all the things like that too.
Yeah, and while like looking at the play, I felt like that I sort of was seeing some parallels between Lady Mcduff and Lady Macbeth. Is that something that you feel like you picked up on too?
I think it's definitely something that is a part of it because there are only a few women in the show, and they are both almost equal in the very beginning, although you never see her, like you see their status, but you see how it changes and you see their power and how they had to use their power and how important their relationships to the men were, and you just got to see how different their lives were, and maybe that was a possibility. Like maybe that's why it was written. This character was used to show where women's status was and like where it could go, and also too to show some humanity, because she was dealing with the basic things of life, like the very basics, like survival, like supporting her husband, those kind of things.
Thank you so much, Verda. I feel like that this has been a very like eye-opening and just makes you really think about these characters and the play overall. But you sit right there, viewers, because we got more coming at you. It's been Trey and Verda. Have a great day.
Now that we've heard from our cast, it's your turn. Take the next 10 minutes to make your own character analysis. Pick one of the characters that we haven't discussed today. You can choose Malcolm, Duncan, anybody that strikes your fancy. And I want you to answer 3 questions. Number 1, what's your backstory? What are the things in your life that have happened up until the beginning of the story? Number 2, what are your character's dreams or ambitions or motivations? And number 3, what's your character afraid of? Take 10 minutes to think about this, and we'll be back after that.